Sweet, so we're going to get into it. Monty, thanks for joining us.
Oh, good.
So recently you just painted one of our pavilion structures down here in Avondale. And we want to, before we kind of look into what you've actually created and why you've created it, I want to understand a little bit about you. Where are you from?
Well, I reside out in Favona, Mangere, South Auckland. Born and raised out those ways. Been there most of my life.
Samoan.
Yeah, Samoan. Yeah, that too. Samoan. Maybe second generation, third generation actually here in New Zealand, and just got like 3 kids and a partner.
How often do you go back to Samoa?
Man, the last time I was back in Samoa was like 10 years ago.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. I was there before they even had those big buildings for the South Pacific Games.
Yeah.
So I hear they've got actual roads now. So
Wow.
yeah.
And so what school did you go to?
So I started schooling at Southern Cross Primary School out in Mangere, and then transitioned over to Mount Ross School Primary and went through the whole campus and finished 7th form around about 2000, and then yeah, that was about it.
Were you always creatively inclined?
I could draw before I could speak, but I always loved to see how things worked. In terms of art, I didn't really concentrate on it until I was like 6th form. Prior to that, it was all like science and math and all that.
And what type of stuff were you into at that time?
I was very into like little things like how hinges are made, how trees grow, evolutionary stuff. I just love to see what like things being made from scratch, and how people would like use their brains on how to connect things. Like for example, woodwork in Japan, how they use no nails to build their buildings. So I found that kind of stuff kind of intriguing. In terms of science, I love thinking about space and what it's like, and one of my dreams was actually to be an astronaut. That or a cartoonist for Disney.
So it sounds like you were very curious.
And still am very curious. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And so after you finished high school, you said you did 7th form.
Yeah.
Did you carry on? What was the next step?
The next step, half of my year for 7th form was back and forth at uni. I did an introduction paper into art and design that was called Caddy at the time. Basically, it was just opening up my eyes to uni and the potentials that lie there. After that, I actually did a paper in screen printing.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, I did a paper in screen printing at first, and I failed that. In all honesty, I mucked around the new freedom, so to say, But then I got back on the horse and did another entry paper into graphic design, and then set off from there.
And so this journey into graphic design, it's not things like layout and publication.
No.
It's illustration.
It's illustration.
Yeah.
So I didn't follow that format of doing like InDesign and publication. Another one was packaging as well, packaging design. But I stuck with illustration because I felt like it was like fine arts, but it wasn't as hard out, if I could say that, as that, like graphic design gave me the skills of the computer world, where at that time, fine arts was purely paints, charcoal, textures, how to achieve this look from this, and that didn't really interest me at all. But what was interesting about the computer was learning the steps, learning how to manipulate things. Like I said, learning how to make things from scratch.
But what did you want to do with that illustration practice? Like, did you already have a vision like, oh, I want to go do illustration and, make clothing? Or...
No, I actually did it just to have a pretty piece of paper on my wall, just to say that you've done it. It was until my final year I got out and I ended up working at Foot Locker and got into the shoe game. Worked there for
sneakerhead.
Bro, I tried to, and it just felt fake ass, People were like going, oh, have you heard of this, blah, blah, and I was like, yeah. All day, bro. But I ended up being there, and then I just fell out of love with it, and ended up working at Custom Tees over in Manukau, and became somewhat their head designer at the back.
So for those that don't know, what is Custom Tees?
Custom Tees is a South Auckland store out in the Manukau Mall, and they specialize in basically what it is, custom tees. You go in, ask them to do a design, and they come up with it, and you print it, and you're away. Yeah, pretty much. So it's a one-stop shop in a way. From there, I ventured into being the head designer for another company called Red, which is a streetwear store based out in South Auckland as well. They've got a few branches here and there. And I was there for like 6 years.
Wow.
As their head designer. Yeah.
And what type of work did you have to do in that role?
They had in-house brands. So when I say that, they had ranges such as Statement, Royalty, and so on. And my job was to research, see what's trending around the world, and somewhat translate that for our New Zealand customer. And they had manufacturers overseas that I dealt with, and somewhat had communication with them and their buyer, and basically produced merchandise.
So they had different labels,
yes,
basically underneath Red.
Yeah.
So they were a retail shop, but also operating different clothing labels or whatever
underneath theirs, and on top of that they had labels like Nike and Adidas on board as well.
You mean in the workplace?
In the workplace, dealing with people outside in meetings, putting on different hats for different people, learning how to somewhat read the room, learning how to sell a pitch, also trying to justify why you did things. That was the biggest challenge. So my vocab kind of changed from working in Custom Tees to working at Red. It was totally a different language altogether. I feel that was my biggest challenge, and also translating other people's ideas. So I had to deal with people that didn't know how to illustrate or draw, but be like, this is what I saw, I want something similar but different.
Do you feel like in those two positions you were able to bring your identity, like your interests and things, into that work, or was it more about servicing other people's ideas?
I was able to stylize my own style within that whole 6 years I was there. It was evident when I left. The labels totally looked different. They looked like a service from there, where beforehand it was stylized. There was a brand, and I don't know how it's tracking now, but every time I go into stores and have a look. What's
the secret of creating a brand identity, do you think?
I think it's all about yourself. As a graphic designer, you had to learn how to somewhat put a bit of spark into something. Say for example, if I was to deal with a rugby league club, my job is to sit there, observe who I'm talking to, observe the room, then look at what they had in the past, and then realize what's the missing link. Why doesn't this scream
them?
Yeah. You know what I mean? And these people don't know any better. But when I translate everything that we've taken from that meeting, spoken to them on a personal level, it's somewhat, you then start to add some love into that. That there is what people see, and that's what people will be like, that's me. The reason being is because I've taken into account who they are, what they do, and what they love. And I do everything in my power to somewhat find that common ground. Therefore, it appeals to the oldies, it appeals to the young ones, you know? And so it becomes, that's how I see how I will build a brand with someone, is basically sit with that person, have a good yarn, have a good coffee, and then take a bit of them back with you.
And so you went from custom tees and then to Red Rat,
Yep.
and then what was the decision to leave Red Rat? After 6 years of security, that's a big step to take to decide to leave.
I started doing Sudo on the side because they wouldn't give me a pay raise. Legal reasons, because they wouldn't change my title. I found out that I was getting paid as a purchasing assistant rather than a graphic designer. When you're put in as a personal, like if you're given a title, right, you are then paid for what that title is.
Sure.
Okay. So if you're head of department, you get paid head of department.
Sure.
Okay. I found out within my 5th year why I wasn't getting a pay rise was because on my contract I've been contracted as a purchasing assistant, and they knew that if they had to pay me senior designer rate, they couldn't afford it.
Right.
So what happened was that I started doing Sudo on the side. I started doing like helping out little labels, you know, doing their stuff, and someone had been doing research on with me, and one day I came into work all amped up to finish off my ranges. Here's a notice. I said, what? Read it, and it was like it's something to do with Sudo custom designs, and they wanted to have the argument that I was doing work within my working hours at Red Rat. So I said to them, like, do you have proof of this? They go, no, but we want to hear your story. I said, let me go home. I talked to one of my cousins, he's a lawyer, and he looked at it and goes, gee, they're trying to fire you. Resign now. So I resigned, and I didn't turn back. After that, I basically went into fight or flight mode, and all the knowledge I got from Red Rat, I just applied to myself. I started, I knew who to look for, I knew what to do, I knew the pricings, I knew how to make margins, and I just said to myself, like, look, I can actually do my own designs.
Just do it yourself?
Just do it myself. So I just said, see you later, and I'm off. Still bad blood, apparently because it's my fault, but yeah, that's what happened. And to be honest, that was probably the best thing I've ever done, man. I did stress for a bit that day, but the moment I got some clarification or justification that I can do it myself, and that was that push, that chain reaction. It would just kind of woke up a sleeping giant.
Catalyst.
Catalyst, yeah.
There's a catalyst to trigger something.
Yeah. And that was that letter, you know, and it would just woke up the sleeping giant, and I was just focused, like, okay, I can do this. Yeah, that was the catalyst for everything, man. And from there, just doors opened up there, you know.
So in your new business,
yes.
What type of work do you typically do for that now?
Well, Sudo basically customizes sports gear, like tag, basketball, any sports gear, we can do it. The only difference with us is that I get to sit down with you and design what's in your head, you know, and that's something you don't do with other companies. I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that's a unique feature we have, and sometimes I feel it's proper that they get to put a face to a name. Even though I'm quite small at the moment, I do intend to grow a lot bigger. One of my main things for the company was more bang for your buck, and saying that we design for free if you manufacture with us. Our prices are a lot cheaper than what you typically have, but it's the same quality, it's the same product. I have been part of a lot of discussions. Like I said, doing the research, you hear the negatives, you hear the cries of, like pricing, the design sucks, this and that. It's the same as that team, different colors. And so that's the problem solving that I had to do. I had to sit there, and as part of our package, it's kind of like every design is unique. If I'm dealing with like 5 teams at a time, I had to do 5 different personalities. And those are those different hats I was talking about. I'll go and put on the New Zealand hat, then put on the Auckland hat, and then put on some, local team hat, and then, sometimes I get them confused. But that's the fun bit, is that I think for myself and for the people I work with, like my family and that, it's the appreciation when they see this stuff. They look at it and they're just like, this is exactly what I wanted, and those are the things I want to hear. And that's the one thing I'm trying to do, is just keep that fire going.
Yep.
Especially during COVID.
So you've got some illustrative skills,
Yes.
and from what I'm hearing, you're being able to apply it into this kind of commercial business sense or application. But we also know that you have roots or history in the graffiti realm, right?
Yeah.
So where did that journey in graffiti begin for you?
That began in my 6th form. So I was running to touch training, and there was a bar called Crystal Bar out in Mangere, and there was a guy painting, and he was painting seashells and sunsets and all that stuff, and his name was Finer. And I was just in awe because, spray can, I was just like, how the hell is he doing those lines? So I stood there watching him doing his cutbacks and all that stuff, and he was a cool dude, and he was throwing up taro at that time. I think it just led to another, and then I met a guy called Jason, who also goes by Odyssey or Sub 1. Basically, that was us 3. We started doing little jobs, and everything grew from there. My first ever big mural was in Otara, and it's still there.
Sick.
Yeah, it's outside the library, the big stone thing it was supposed to be a stone seatbelt, and that was for the land and transport
Oh,
mural.
sick.
Yeah. So that's the one that hasn't been buffed over yet. And from there, just doing little things. I went from doing roller backies for the boys while they did their pieces, get your duties on.
Pay your dues?
Yeah, bro, I have to, man. And the way I learned was learning how to do sunsets. I was quite curious on why. I got a bit frustrated at the time, but honestly, if I didn't learn how to do sunsets, it basically does everything. Like you learn how to fade colors, you learn how to puff off colors, blend them properly. Coconut trees will help with your fine lines. Islands will help with your fades and all that, your edges. I always stuck with sunsets. The reason why I painted that sunset, because that's me. Like, I can do characters, I can think outside the square if I wanted to, but if you had to put me in a nutshell, it's the sunset.
Yep.
And I do it everywhere. That's probably an island thing. That's probably an FDKNS thing too. We do sunsets and everything. But I feel that's the one thing when I think about graph that hits me the most, is I always look at people's backgrounds. I love backgrounds. For me, doing a mean piece is cool.
Yep.
But if you don't have the background to support it,
People don't make enough of an effort on the
Nah,
background,
they
eh?
don't.
And thinking of it more as a wall rather
Yeah.
than just a spot for the piece.
Yeah. I think those are one of the values that isn't really taught when the boys are all painting. You don't have a background guy.
Yeah.
Like for me and the boys, I'm always the carrot and the background dude. I let them do the pieces, but my job is to make sure that I back them up in a way. And you rarely ever get to see any background guys now. So I started doing letters. It's amazing how, like, I love the unity that the boys have now. Like, you watch the young ones paint. There's no hostility between them. Remember when we went and painted next to them?
Yeah.
There was no like,
No, it wasn't like
nah.
it wasn't
They're
staunch or anything. Yeah.
Nah, they were all good, man. And I love that. And I feel that's how graph should be. You know, yeah, you might have your little gripes and all that stuff, but I mean, you can deal with it your own way.
Yeah.
But I feel like the bigger picture of the thing.
At what point did you join FDKNS? Because
I think I joined in my 2 years later.
2 years later.
2 years later.
How big was FDKNS already at that time? In my mind, I always know FDKNS to be a big crew.
Yeah. I think there's like
50 people.
50 people at the moment. Some from South Auckland, one from Huntley, 2 from up north, 1 in Germany. Yeah. So, Sienna, she puts us up all the time, which is cool. So I had to do something back for her.
Yeah.
You know, because she's always saying, I miss New Zealand. So I'm like, I'll do you a piece, man. You know, give you some love from over here, bro. But, I mean, at that time, there was not many painters, bro. Like, a lot of them were still the old school cats, you know. I would say now, painting-wise, there's probably like 25.
Yep.
You know, a lot of the old guys have gone and done their own families. They're still FDKNS, you know, regardless. We even got like second generations coming in.
Yeah.
You know, daughters of
Wow.
old school guys popping up. And it's amazing when you hear this. Oh, have you heard of this person? No. Oh, that's blah blah blah's daughter. I'm like,
Wow.
huh? It's like, oh man. Now I'm at a stage where I'm just orchestrating, keeping that standard up, you know, because I've got views for and dreams for the crew. Standard is one of them.
Yeah.
You know, we have our own MO. I just don't give a crap about anyone, but I want to try and like keep that fire going, but in a more productive way, getting people on the wall, getting them to paint with people that inspire them, you know, like yourself, you know, some of the other boys. And what that does for us, it just builds bridges.
Absolutely.
And that's all I want to do, is just build a massive foundation where FDKNS is somewhat stable. And they are stable, but we're now reaching out and opening up those doors, like, bro, come over and paint with us, you know, have a jam. And it's just getting to know people, you know. Life's too short, bro.
Yeah. And what's the future of FDKNS? Because you mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago that there was this passing of a torch type thing, you know.
Well, the future of FDKNS, in my view, is, like I see it, man, is just basically community based. What we're doing now is that we're doing walls for the communities. We see any wall, we're just going the old school way of asking the shopkeeper or asking who owns those buildings, and just somewhat give them an insight of, this is what we do, you know, can we put something nice on your wall? And what that does is that people tend to trust us more with briefs, you know. We come 6 months later, no tags on it, we're just going to repaint the wall. And they go, oh yes, what are you going to do now? You know, they're excited because they get to come on their lunch break, sit outside, get to meet the painters. And that's one thing that I want with the boys, is that if anyone comes up to you and asks you questions, regardless of what state they're in or who they are, just be courteous and just be like, hey, yeah, this and that, you know. Obviously you're going to get a troll that comes along now and then, but it doesn't mean you have to put your can down and throw hands. Just let it go, bro. That's just them. But yeah, that's the future for FDKNS for me, is just getting the boys up to scratch, becoming part of New Zealand's graffiti history, and just make it known that, you know, that's South Auckland's crew. It's not just us. We're representing everyone in South Auckland.
What sense of responsibility do you have, if any, as being part of, you know, representing FDKNS?
I would say probably the face of it, eh? I don't know if I'm the most active one in the crew at the moment, but the only reason why I'm being active is so that the name doesn't fall backwards. Now that the boys are starting to see the amount of work that I'm doing, they're all starting to come out of the woodwork and being like, hey, can we join in? Bro, sweet as, you know? So that's my responsibility, is to keep that fire going. I would say, like, to be honest, like, if people say that I'm a bit too hard up, then that's their prerogative, not mine.
Who would be, if you're the motivator for your crew at the moment, who would you say maybe 2 or 3 people that have been a motivator or role model, I guess, for you?
Viner is definitely one of them. Reason being, the way he thinks outside the box. If you look at his letter forms, they're totally different to what you see with everyone else. Like, we did a FDKNS out in Southport in Australia, and he had this sketch, and I swear it was just lines. And then I was like, okay, sweet. And then all of a sudden it just turned into this real tough but elegant outline, and it was a chromie. His hand styles and all that stuff as well is just, I can't even explain it. Another one would be Juice. Juice was the one who somewhat stood up for me when I went up and painted at the hip hop summit. He was the one that told them, nah, he's all good, you know, like, and we became friends ever since then. I was just this random cat that just said, oh, I'm painting him. He goes, oh, okay. And then we just started talking, and we just built a bridge there, and it's become a bigger bridge ever since, you know. Curb is another one. A lot of TS crew, the kinship they have with each other, you could see it in their work. You can still see it now, you know. They read each other like nothing. You're like, another person coming up, I didn't know much graphers. Dime was another one. Dime was another one. I loved his color schemes and all that. Character wise, Dales. There's one dude I can't read. I look at his stuff, and he posted up this plain piece of paper, and I looked at it, I went, I wonder what this cat's gonna do now. And then I saw it, I just went, just how did you get that, bro? What I don't get is, like, when I look at the fine detail, it looks like a woodcut. And I'm just like, silly. The reason why I love his characters growing up was the use of color. Traditionally, you know, like when you draw a character, it's outline, color, outline again. This guy will take a black wall and just etch at it with colors, and then all of a sudden there's a face, and then a big rat, and then it's got a bird cage with a spider web linked to I'm just like,
some crazy stuff.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. It's things that I can't do. When it comes to, can control yourself, I don't know how you do what you do.
All practice, eh?
Sipa is another one.
Yeah, he's dope.
Oh, bro, I'm a super clean dude, man. But yeah, those guys, that's probably my list of people that, like, look up to, inspire, or aspire to be. Do you know?
Awesome.
And I like to try and stay in my lane with what I'm good at, which is I transitioned from painting females to now just painting Pokemon.
That's probably a good segue, like, to what I wanted to ask you about, what influences you in terms of the subject matter of the work. So I know that having observed your work over the past couple of years, you know, there's a lot of Japanese influence, there's a lot of popular culture, you know, things like cartoons and comics and things like that. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things that inspire you there?
I've always been a massive anime fan. Top 5, One Piece, Naruto, Hunter x Hunter. It's like these little kids that have OP powers and they just fight each other. Toriko is another one, and Bleach. That's my top 5. All had to do with like ninjutsu or Japanese gods or powers. Or I love something with a good story. I've been watching cartoons all my life, eh? Cartoon Network, Dexter's Laboratory, Pinky and the Brain, and Maniacs. Classics, man. And the reason why I loved it was just to see the drawing sense, drawing style. How do they express dumb and brainy, you know, that kind of stuff. Then it just influenced my work, really. Comic wise, I like Todd McFarlane, who did Spawn. I like Jim Lee a little bit, just because of his aspect on contrast, it's black and whites. But my biggest influence is probably J. Scott Campbell, who does like Danger Girl and a lot of female type stuff, and I followed them for ages. Got a sketchbox, learned how to draw.
Wow.
Basically learning, trying to find my own styling within that, so that it feels right when I put it up. That somewhat changed my drawing style from comics into anime, and then started doing I used to do girls with tattoos and that was probably in my days when I was just not a father.
Yep.
My state of mind at that time was basically going out with the boys and all that stuff, and drawing was one of my main things that I did all the time. But then once I started having kids, your mind changes.
Yep.
All of a sudden, it doesn't feel right drawing half naked ladies on. I tried, but I just felt really odd.
Yep.
I just felt like my son's gonna see this.
So has it become more like, what would my son appreciate?
Pretty much, yeah. What would
or think?
Well, I started thinking about my parents. And what they do. They're ministers. And so I started reflecting hard out, why the hell did I draw all this? Why did I think it was cool? And I totally forgot the reason. And so I started molding my artwork so it was more appreciated by older and younger generation. And so when I started doing Pokestops for Pokemon Go, I started doing the whole asking my kids, what Pokemon should I do today? And what that did was, when my kids will come and watch, Dad did the blood, and that's the biggest reward for me.
Yeah. And they can appreciate it.
They can appreciate it.
Connect.
Adults were driving past, yo, Charizard, and he was like, oh, sheesh, you watch Pokemon too. It just opened up a whole different kettle of fish when I had kids, So that transition into Japanese art as well. I started doing more. I started researching more into why ghosts are the way they are, and started watching more anime. And then I started doing something like Gundams. I just got this massive stack of boxes that I haven't built, but I just keep buying Gundam kits. But the reason why I buy them is the color scheme. I love the make of it, the design, the line work. You can break it up. It looks like pieces, but in a jigsaw way, and it's quite different. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to my graph style and anything like that, but I'm trying to build somewhat Mr. Burns identity. And what I try and do with that is add my anime styling to my characters, so they're not too harsh and too hard. But I also, with my letters, I try and keep to the basic throwy bubble stees with a little bit of extensions now and then. But work more on the background, the foreground, the character, and it just works.
And so with all of those influences, and then obviously going to what you paint on the wall, how much sketching usually takes place in between that?
None.
But I know you do lots of sketches.
Yeah, I memorize them. Muscle memory. So when I do a B, the B is always in a same form, but then I step back, and depending on what music I'm listening to, depending how I'm feeling, it will change, but the form is there. So before I even roll up, I just sketch what the normal form would be. Make sure everything's even, and then from there, depends on how I feel. What colors are we using today? And I feel like that's the most honest approach, for myself, because I'm actually putting my brain to work.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
not just an exercise of copying.
Yeah. Well, me personally, I feel frustrated when I do take a sketch, and it's happened. I take a sketch and it doesn't look the same, and I get frustrated and I just stop.
You're just trying to replicate.
It sucks. It sucks because that feeling that I did with the sketch is not the feeling I'm feeling when I'm putting it up on the wall. So I would rather sacrifice the sketch read the room, see who I'm painting with. What are we doing today, boys? This is our color scheme. Sweet. Watch what they're painting and be like,
respond to it.
How can I adapt to what this is going on? You know, oh, you're doing a character in one of your letters. Okay, cool. You could be in any situation, you know, like get called out for. This is just me thinking though. You get called out for a battle, freestyle, sweet, got it. You know,
got to work with what you got.
Got to work with what you got, man. And there are a lot of people that can do that. You know, like yourself and some of the other boys. You know, Scraps and all that, bro. They just mean piece.
Let's do it.
You know, and that's the inspiration that I get. Like, I'm still new to letters. I've only done letters for like the last 2 years, but I feel like I needed to do that because I was getting stale with the characters. You know, and not many people were doing characters, so I just decided to have some fun with letters, and I'm loving it.
We talked about your kind of commercial illustration work and your business. Talked a little bit about your graph journey.
Yep.
So how do you find a balance between those two things amidst having a family and raising kids?
Finding the balance, it's actually a chore. It's basically scheduling. You know, I schedule my paints. Usually I have my own time to myself. Family time is family time. Work time is work time. But I always try to schedule like one day, like Sunday, and just plan ahead with the boys. Like, guys, I've got Sunday off, who's keen to paint? And then from there, being transparent with my partner as well. You know, that Sunday's my painting day. I'll be painting, 3 days notice. It's good because she understands that I need to do that. I always come back fresh for Monday with new ideas and all that stuff. Because being cooped up in the office, doing the same old thing...
It's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy, man. And so black books have saved me. I compete in some competitions now and then, and it's nice to know that I can still compete, and still be up there, which is all good.
What do you think of the current graffiti scene at the moment, whether it be in Auckland or abroad?
Well, with Auckland, I think the current one is starting to get a little bit healthy in terms of the legal side, and also with them actually applying it to proper walls as well. I think that practice is cool. Like we said when we painted with the other boys, it's not as roughneck as we grew up with, you know what I mean? There's a better kinship between them. They all know who each other are. I feel like they got each other's back a lot more. Like I say, man, once you get that spark on with them, now that we've got social media, there's more interaction.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm enjoying it. And like I say, man, I'm just sitting back and doing me and the crew, and just working towards what's better for them for the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Monty, for joining us.
Ooh.
Really appreciate it. Really good to have a yarn and get a little bit of insight into you as an artist, as a person, and also as an illustrator and a businessman. You're many things, and I know you put on many hats. For all of you guys that have tuned in, thank you very much for listening into this episode. In the next episode, for the next pavilion, we actually have Deos painting, so I really look forward to having a chat with him and seeing his story and hearing his story and knowing his kind of journey. If you like the content, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave us a comment below, and we hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.